This practice is based entirely on the floor, and we'll just take some nice stretches for our legs, a little back bend, a child's pose, and some resting. You might like to practice this as a sequence just on its own, or maybe you add it together with some other practices, some other selections from the pick and mix. So let's begin cross-legged and seated. And you might like to place something underneath your sitting bones, especially if you do find cross-legged position not the easiest to sit in. So maybe that's a folded blanket or even a yoga bolster. Bringing your hands to your knees, and let's start to tip forward and over to one side. And around we go. So just taking a really nice, slow, circular movement. Torso circles. Your torso circles can be as big or as small as you choose, but I encourage you to practice them slowly and to lean in really close to the sensations you might be feeling in your body and to your breath. And maybe you're closing your eyes if that feels okay, or maybe you're just softening your gaze so that you're not putting too much attention into what you might be seeing. Or just go in one direction for now. We'll do a little sequence and then we'll do the other direction. So the next time you come back upright, let's pause here for a moment and fold forward over our legs. So maybe today you're choosing to keep your spine straight. And that would be of benefit to you if you happen to have a back injury. Also, by keeping your spine straight, your chest lifted and your head floating a little bit more upright, this can also really localize the stretch, being more into your sort of buttocks and hips, maybe into your groin a little bit. If you do decide to fold forward, this will then also bring in a stretch for your back. And if that feels appropriate for you, then absolutely feel free to add that in. If it doesn't, then feel free to keep your spine more upright and to focus on that aspect of the stretch. Taking a few more breaths here. Is there some way that you could soften a little bit more? Making sure that your softening doesn't mean that you collapse, but that it also takes you away from any sense of over-efforting. And then when you're ready, coming upright from here and leaning over to one side, placing your hand on the floor for support, lifting your opposite arm up and taking a side bend. And maybe your elbow comes all the way to the floor, maybe not. Seeing if you can still keep both of your buttocks down on the floor, even if one is a little bit lighter than the other. Allowing your shoulders to be nice and easy. You might like to move your head around a little bit. And if it helps, you can draw your tummy in just a fraction. And then let's come up from here, growing really tall through our spine as we arrive back in center, and switch the cross of your legs. So once again, bringing your hands to your knees, and we'll do the same sequence but the other way. So this time circling in the opposite direction. If you can't remember which way it was, don't worry too much. Circling either big or small, but if possible, slowly. Feeling your breath. Maybe your breath and your movement match together in some way. Letting this be a nice, easy, releasing kind of practice. Soothing even. And taking one more circle in this direction. And when you arrive back at center again, you can tip forward over your legs. Remembering spine lengthened can be a good choice if you know that you need to be a bit careful with your back. But folding forward can also be a nice choice if that feels okay for your body. Whatever it is that you're choosing to do, can you notice where the strongest sensation is in your body right now? Maybe the sensation is one of stretch. Maybe it's one of pressure. Maybe it's something else. And perhaps you can breathe into that sensation. And perhaps you can welcome a slightly deeper breath. And then coming up from here and leaning across to your other side this time, bringing your hand, maybe your elbow to the floor. Other arm can lift up towards the ceiling, possibly reaching overhead. It might help to draw your tummy in just a little bit, especially if you know you need to be careful with your lower back. Keeping both of your buttocks on the floor. It doesn't matter how far you go into any of these stretches. What matters is that these stretches are helpful for you. So always placing purpose above what you might consider to be a deeper or a better version of the stretch or shape or posture. What is the purpose? What is the intention? Is it helpful? And then when you're ready, coming out from there, let's come down onto our bellies for a little bit of a back bend. So you might like to just come into Sphinx pose, where you bring your forearms to the floor, elbows underneath your shoulders. If that feels a bit too strong, you could always take your elbows a little bit wider and let your chest drop a little bit further towards the floor. Or if you feel as though you'd like a deeper back bend, you can take your hands a little bit wider and then press into them as you start to lift your elbows away from the floor. So you can choose which version feels like a good back bend for you today, a good level or depth of back bend for you today. Whatever one you're choosing, can you notice your breath? And can you find a sense of ease? So even though there may be some parts of you that are active right now, once again, can you let that activeness not take you into a sense of over-efforting, so that the amount of action or effort is appropriate, just the right amount. If it feels good, you might like to move your head around here. Maybe you take some really, really slow neck circles. And this might also give you a good indication of whether or not you might be really tense in your shoulders. And if you are, maybe it helps to come into a slightly gentler version of this back bend, so that you are able to move your head. Maybe it's chin to chest and then lifting your head slightly, and you might feel a bit of stretch or some change in sensation depending on what movements you might be choosing to make with your head and neck. And then for the last few moments here, perhaps floating your head and imagining or feeling or intending as though you're drawing your chest forward slightly. So it might be a little bit like you're trying to pull your hands and elbows back towards you, so that you come more into a stretch, an opening of your chest and a bend of your upper back. And there might be a little bit more activeness happening here, or action happening here, and that's okay. Take a few breaths. And then let's lower all the way down to the floor, placing your hands beside you, pushing all the way up and taking a nice child's pose. If child's pose doesn't feel nice for you, then you might like to just come onto your back and hug your knees towards your chest. Maybe you have your hands resting underneath your head, or maybe you've got your arms extended out in front, or perhaps they're back beside your feet. Allowing your knees to be wide enough apart to accommodate your belly and your chest. And starting to encourage your breath to be deep down in your lower belly. Swelling and possibly pressing into your thighs as you breathe in. And softening and releasing as you breathe out. Taking 3 or 4 more breaths here. And then using your hands to bring you up from there, let's find a seated shape. You can extend your legs out in front. And you might like to just bring one of your feet along the inside of your leg. It doesn't really matter where along the inside of your leg it goes. If it helps, you can always support underneath your bent leg with a yoga block or a cushion or a pillow. Sitting up nice and tall, you might like to lift the flesh of your buttocks out so that you can really find your sitting bone, and then beginning to pitch your weight forward over your extended leg. Now this leg doesn't have to be straight, it might be a little bit bent. That might be the best way for you to access some sense of forward folding. And you can choose, maybe you do keep a soft amount of action in your leg, so maybe you're drawing your thigh muscle a little closer to the bone, maybe you're drawing your toes back slightly towards you. Maybe that feels like a good way of entering into this shape for you. Or maybe you're letting everything relax and taking a more yin approach, a softer approach. You can choose. Once again, if you do have issues with your back, and they tend to get worse when you bend forward, I really encourage you to keep your torso lengthened, to keep your spine upright, and to fold forward from deep in your hip crease, so it's as though you're trying to bring your tummy to your thigh rather than your head to your shin. And you should still get a good stretch through the back of your leg here. When you're ready, coming up from there, so your leg that is bent, just bringing it to the floor, and placing either your foot just on the outside of your knee, or you could cross your leg over if you like. Whichever knee is bent, you can take your opposite arm and wrap it around, sitting nice and tall, using your hand on the floor behind you to take you into a twist. And holding here. Really encouraging your spine to be long and tall, lengthened and upright. Finding your breath, and again checking in with how much effort are you making. Is it too much? Is it not enough? Inquiring into your practice moment to moment. And in this way your practice will stay alive and relevant. And then when you're ready, coming out of there and extending your leg out long. Let's do that on the other side. Bending your leg in. Sitting nice and tall and starting to tip forward over your extended leg, choosing whether you're keeping a little bit of activity in your extended leg or whether you're letting everything relax. Make sure that you are supporting yourself in terms of any injury or vulnerability that you might have in your spine. And finding your breath. And what's happening with your neck here and your head. Do some really slow little mindful movements. Do they help? Do they help you to stay away from that place of tension and over-efforting? And then coming up from there, placing the sole of your foot on the floor, either on the outside or the inside of your extended leg, and wrapping your opposite arm around it, sitting nice and tall as you place your hand behind and move into a twist. You can keep your hand on the floor behind you and then use that arm to encourage your spine to grow taller and longer. Finding breath here. And then unwinding yourself from here and extending your leg out long. And from here you might like to make your way down to Shavasana if you're coming to the end of your practice and rest there. Or perhaps you are going to add on another one of the pick and mix selections that I've recorded for you. So thank you for joining me in this practice today.